Let's bring in Jenna Ellis. She's a constitutional law attorney. We're also joined by U.S. Attorney Richard Roth. He's the founder of the Roth law firm. Jenna, I seem to remember President Trump ordering a couple of thousand troops to the U.S.-Mexico border before the midterms and then bringing them back shortly after the midterms. So what exactly will these troops be doing that's any different other than helping President Trump draw attention to the border?
Well, I don't think that this is just a political stunt. I think that we've seen that there is an ongoing and escalating immigration crisis. We've seen the caravan that is certainly making its way through Texas, and this is really just about securing the border. And so if the Democrats aren't willing to compromise for a wall or some other type of border security, then what other option does the president have besides having basically a wall of soldiers? And so this is really what this is about, and I think that he's going to address that tomorrow night in the State of the Union very clearly to say this is about protecting America's border. It's about protecting families, and Congress really needs to act.
Richard.
Jenna, you know I love you, and I wish you were sitting next to me like you were last few times, but this is a political stunt. I have not heard anything about terrorism on the borders, any immigrants going in illegally other than normal. What are we hearing to increase the number from 600 to 4,300? Come on, we are talking about a 2020 election bid. We are talking about Donald Trump declaring a state of emergency. We are talking about a preface to the State of the Union address. This is a political stunt. There's nothing we've heard. I don't think Mexican terrorism is running rampant in Arizona or Texas. We certainly would know if it was. So
Richard, you know what is running rampant, though, is the drug trafficking, the sex trafficking, and the continued escalation of prioritizing the border, because we can't allow these things to continue. At what point do you draw a bright line and you say enough is enough? And you have to do that.
We agree with that. We agree.
We do agree with that. So at what point do we do that?
It is the drug trafficking. The problem is the drug trafficking is coming in legally. It's not coming in through the lack of a wall. That's the entire problem with this notion that you need $5.7 billion is that the stuff that's coming in, the drug trafficking, the terrorism, the vandalism, is coming in through it legally. I don't know how they're going to. Maybe there's a miraculous way that these 4,300 people can pick a Mexican out and say, you have drugs. But a good search at the border, around the caravan, around the car, around the truck, into the people's pockets is all they need. They don't need more troops.
Well, but if you ask Custom and Border Patrol agents, they say we need a wall, we want a wall. How can Democrats argue with that?
Some of them say that. Some of them say that. The ones that are...
We saw like 3 of them that look very identical, right?
It's funny how, this has become such a polarized issue. It's really a Republican-Democrat issue. I don't know if it's gone from what do we need? It's gone from what do we need to what did the Republicans want? There was never a need for $5.7 billion. In fact, no one has said we need a $5.7 billion wall, except for our number one and only Donald Trump. Everyone said $2 billion, $3 billion, maybe $1.5 billion. I agree that there's a need for more money for the wall. But to sit and put a line in the sand at $5.7 billion, or I will shut the country down again, that's very problematic.
Jenna, you said last week on the show that if something gets produced, if there is an agreement between this bipartisan committee, Democrats, Republicans, House members, Senate members, in terms of overall border security, that you would call out Mitch McConnell if he does not introduce it on the floor of the U.S. Senate. And the theory is that he will not do so if it doesn't include any money for a border wall. Are you still in that position of willing to call out Mitch McConnell if he does not introduce a bipartisan agreement onto the floor of the Senate?
Of course, because immigration as an issue is given to the federal government, specifically to Congress and the Constitution, to legislate. And I think that's what President Trump has continued to be so strong on, is calling Congress to act. And if this wouldn't be such a political partisan issue, this shouldn't be about Republicans or Democrats. This should be about American families. This should be about border security. And if they would actually come together in good faith, and I have been saying this on this show so often with my good friend Richard, and if we would see that Congress would come together and would actually cohesively put together an immigration and border security package, then absolutely I would be willing to call out Mitch McConnell. And I think that that would be the same posture that true conservatives and policy interested people would take, because this shouldn't be Democrats versus Republicans. This should be pro-family.
Jenna, I agree with you. Mitch McConnell has to grab his gavel and grab something else and pass legislation, not Donald Trump's legislation. Let them bring legislation to Donald Trump and let him veto it. I don't think it's ever going to happen because he's afraid about the repercussions for the Republican Party. But let Mitch McConnell do what he's supposed to be doing in the legislative branch. Let him come up with a bipartisan legislation, be it $2.2 billion, $2.4 billion, pass something. Don't just sit there as a lame duck and wait for Donald Trump to tell you what you should do. That's the problem.
But Nancy Pelosi is the other half of that equation. You know,
I agree with that.
Let's have her use her gavel as well. I mean, bipartisan has to mean that everyone comes together. Again, it shouldn't be about Democrat versus Republican. It should be about the fact that they are congressmen and women who were elected to do a job, which is to protect the legitimate interests of the American people. Let them all come together, forget DNR labels, and actually provide comprehensive solutions. And no one is willing to do that. And I think, again, President Trump is saying, here is my line in the sand. Now it is your turn to act.
Yeah, but I agree with you. But the problem is when the president puts a line in the sand, it makes Mitch McConnell unable to act. He's going to bring somebody to the president. He does not want to be vetoed. So as much as Nancy Pelosi also has responsibility, at the end of the day, we have a Republican Senate. We have a Republican president. The president has to say to the Senate, you bring me legislation. I will then let you know if it's good enough. That's the way to negotiate.
That's why we have the veto override. That is why we have Congress can override that. And so if Congress would come together and say, here is our comprehensive bipartisan solution, and again, forget the DNR labels, they have the veto override that is part and parcel to the Constitution so that they don't have to rely just solely on what the executive branch is willing to veto.
I agree.
I'm dying to bring up Tall's favorite topic of the day, and that is this issue of executive time. We found out because of a leak from the Trump White House that Richard, 60% of his working hours are spent in what's known as unstructured executive time, not listed on any calendar, doesn't appear to be any meetings, there may be phone calls. What's wrong with the President of the United States, given all of his responsibilities, taking time to watch the television, go on the Twitter, play video games, whatever
this is what he does during executive time.
Executive time may be watching old reruns of Captain Kangaroo. It may be Twitter time. We don't know what it is. But I will tell you that normally you would think that 80% of his day should be filled with being the president, meeting, working on legislature, trying to come up with new, with if you will, policies and procedures. We don't know what that 60% is. It makes me nervous because it's probably him watching this show, watching the good-looking Dave Schuster, watching Tal.
I promise you he's not watching this channel. But
and then commenting on it with Twitter. So we don't know what he's doing, but it is sort of funny.
Well, if he's watching right now, Richard, he should tweet to both of us and say, "What a great job!" and let's have you guys go into Congress and negotiate this whole thing.
I don't think Donald Trump's tweeting me for a while.
President Trump, if you're watching, you can totally tweet us. We'd be okay with that.
Wait, but you just settled here with Richard on 2.2 or 2.4, if I'm not wrong, right, Jenna?
I think that we can come to a comprehensive bipartisan solution to border
security. A number.
Security.
Do you have a number?
Yes, we could. I don't specifically have a number because you know why? I'm not part of Congress and I haven't looked at all the exact particulars, and that is why policy needs to be vested in the hands of those in Congress with the power to do something about that.
All right,
and
I
so
just
I think
want to...
For a lot of us, though, who comment on all of this, you know, we can throw out a number and we could say, oh, well, the 5 point whatever billion is absolutely ridiculous. We don't know that for sure. And I think that a lot of us who comment on these things need to be really careful when we're criticizing some of those numbers because we don't actually have all of the information that is available to Congress.
But what Jen and I agree on is the system is not working. Let the system work. Let the legislative branch, an independent branch, do their job and bring a passed bill to the president. And the reason why it's not working now is because they're afraid of the Donald Trump, if you will, feedback. That's what they're afraid of.
Jenna, really quickly, regarding the president's executive time, are you worried about this executive time or more about the leak, the fact that the president's schedule has leaked?
You know, I'm not worried about either of them. I mean, this is a president who has done so much and in his first 2 years has actually used the position of the executive that he's had to do a lot for the American people. I'm not concerned at all.
Jenna, we'll save that one for an hour debate on what he's done for the American people.
Executive time. It's now part of our national lingo. Executive time. We need some executive time.
Yeah, that's why we're having a break right now.
Jenna Ellis and Richard Roth, thank you both so much.